When Maddie dances, she's a breath of fresh air. You're like the stuff we spray in the bathroom.
Dance Mom star Kendall Vertes has exposed dance moms for allegedly shady practices.
Since Abby's introduction to television, it has been obvious that she flirts a lot with younger men, but sometimes her flirting has gone too far, with people who are much too young.
You have to be really hot, sexy. Make it like you're 17 years old. Okay, the new number, big hot, it's sassy.
Yup. She gave this to us.
No! You're not gonna run in there and cry boo-hoo-hoo! I've had it!
As documented by several people, Dan certainly had a trend with the kids he would work with. He'd pick one person out, he'd tell them they were going to be a star with his help, and then he'd love bomb them with praise. Until time passed, he would become more passive about his investment in them, and then he would inevitably pick out a new kid to be his next starlet.
In my personal opinion, there are way too many similarities between Dan Schneider from Nickelodeon, the quiet on-set predator, and Abby Lee Miller from Dance Moms. In the glamorous world of entertainment, fame often comes at a price. But what happens when the cost is the well-being of young talents, their innocence sacrificed on the altar of success? Abby Lee Miller, the formidable dance coach from Dance Moms, ruled her studio with an iron fist. Her sharp tongue and relentless pursuit of perfection became synonymous with the show's success. But lurking beneath the glitter and glamour was a darker reality. And then there's Dan Schneider, the mastermind behind some of Nickelodeon's most beloved shows. Behind the scenes, whispers of misconduct and mistreatment swirled, leaving a trail of shattered childhoods and unanswered questions. In this YouTube miniseries, we peel back the layers of power in entertainment, exposing the dangerous parallels between Abby Lee Miller's treatment of the Dance Moms girls and the allegations surrounding Dan Schneider and the treatment of his casts on Nickelodeon. Join us as we delve into the murky depths of fame and the price paid by those who dare to chase their dreams in the spotlight. So in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at those similarities and having a conversation around them, because I feel like Abby Lee Miller just has way too many predatory behaviors slide underneath the bus. The intention of this video is not to say that Abby Lee Miller just simply got away with all of these things, but to point out that there are very many power imbalances and dangerous similarities between her and Dan Schneider that are simply being overlooked. Let's hop into it. In today's video, I'm going to be referencing a video called We Don't Talk About Dan Schneider that was created by the YouTube creator Quentin Review.
I am going to talk about Dan Schneider, the collapsing star that is Dan Schneider.
I'm not referencing this video to be biased. I'm referencing this video because I feel as if the journalism done in this video is incredibly concise and that he did a great job at having integrity in his journalism, and that he intentionally made a point to only cover facts and to not have journalism where you kind of fill in the blank.
I will only be discussing claims and allegations which have an actual source. Things that are on the record, that have been said in interviews, in articles, in books, in documentaries. If it comes from an anonymous source giving tips to a TikTok creator or some forum post on a shady website, no. I'm sorry, but no, absolutely not. And people sometimes accuse me of defending Dan Schneider. And they say to me, hey, this is a bad guy. This is an awful guy. So why are you questioning these rumors about him? Because the truth matters. And I would love to change that, but it's above my pay grade. And that doesn't stop being a reality just because it is more interesting to just treat truths and untruths as equally valid in the realm of discourse.
So in this video, we're going to be going through allegations that were made towards Dan Schneider and about Dan Schneider, and I'm going to be making direct comparisons to actions by Abby Lee Miller that are public information that have been very, very similar. I also want to touch on JoJo Siwa, and not because she is a Nickelodeon performer, but because she seems to be following in the same toxic traits and regurgitating the same abuse that she went through over on Dance Moms with Abby Lee Miller. And who knows, maybe this same cycle continued on Nickelodeon as well. We don't really know because JoJo didn't have a TV show.
If someone insists that they did not experience abuse on these sets or with any of these people, I'm not going to call them liars. I'm not going to accuse them of having Stockholm Syndrome. And I'm not going to put them on blast for that.
Do you guys ever talk to Gianna?
No, Gianna's not nice.
I never like to comment on things or get involved in things that don't involve me, but this, I just have to say, this just came up on my For You page, and that is absolutely the most disgusting and ignorant thing that I have heard anybody say. First of all, Gia is one of the sweetest people in the whole world, and second of all, she works so hard every single week for so many people, including Chloe. She had one of the most stressful jobs on the show. She was in charge of choreographing every single number. Now, yes, of course, everyone has their moments, and everyone isn't nice 24/7, including you, Christy. But the thing is you don't need to say that somebody is not a nice person. I'm sure you're a very nice person, even though the experience that I've had with you, you were not nice to me. You actually made a very rude comment to me, but it may have just been a moment. You don't need to say that people are not nice people. I would never say that you're not a nice person just because our moment you were rude to me. It's just not what you do.
So Dan Schneider is a creator and I guess you could say former actor that is responsible for quite literally an entire empire of children's entertainment that would have spanned like the entire millennial generation and further.
When it comes to shows where Dan Schneider acted as a proper showrunner, he is most associated with 9 programs. All That, The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, iCarly, Victorious, Sam and Cat, Henry Danger, and Game Shakers. This represents well over 2 decades of children's content.
Similar to how Abby Lee Miller was trying to create an empire with Abby Lee Studio Rescue, Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition, Dance Moms, Abby Lee Dance With Me, Madhouse, etc. The difference being Dan Schneider's shows were at the very loosest sketch comedy, but in general they were scripted television shows. But what's so wrong with idolizing somebody for their career and for their success, you may ask? And that is where we get into the problem with today's video, and it's not a problem. If you see somebody that is successful and they're doing something that you aspire to be and inspired to do, that is totally, absolutely fine. But when you decide to study how they did it and follow the same demonic patterns, whether you did it intentionally or just because you share the same personality traits as this person, that is where the devil lies in the details. Now, I personally think that when we focus more specifically on events that happened on a produced reality television show in the moments that could have been produced, that we're actually taking away from the quite evil things that Abby Lee Miller has done as a human being that were not produced and that were not part of a television show where it's just kind of speculative whether something actually happened that was abusive or not. So in today's video, I'm going to be focusing on things that happened outside of the show or things that we literally saw on screen that were not okay. So it seems that when you talk about Abby Lee Miller, that the response is very similar to when you talk about Dan Schneider. And that can be explained by this clip here.
That everyone tries to read it as sounding sinister. You know, you put creepy background music behind it, you make the image black and white, and you do an invert effect, and it's like, oh, this is the most creepy thing.
One thing that I think that Abby Lee Miller took inspiration from Dan Schneider is the fact that he would use his actors as walking billboards for his own personal brand, Dan Warp. Sound like the ALDC?
Dan Warp is Schneider's official blog and social media brand. Here he would post behind-the-scenes information and personal stories. Specifically during the era of iCarly and Victorious, Dan had begun the practice of hiding Easter eggs referencing his own brand, under the guise that this would inspire viewers to follow him online. His handle was added to the logo of Schneider's Bakery, and iCarly characters would be seen wearing such shirts as Dan Warp Tweets and Follow Dan Warp.
And how is this just like Abby Lee Miller? With the ALDC jackets, the ALDC merch, selling the ALDC merch at every single meet and greet. The new ALDC jackets that would be introduced while they were on the show. The fact that all of the merchandise sales were exclusive to Abby Lee Miller and were not related to the Dance Moms show itself, and that was her own income stream. The fact that Kendall herself had to say,
I love Abby. She's my music manager, but it's not like she owns me. I'm not like her product. I'm a person, I'm a human.
That they are people, not products. This is a child that is making that remark.
Did you notice that?
But the issue is grander than just Schneider promoting himself. I think the bigger conversation is about Nickelodeon promoting Schneider. Growing up, it was not uncommon for Nickelodeon to broadcast segments illustrating Schneider as the genius who single-handedly created a media empire and shared universe.
And I think that the same thing needs to be said about Abby Lee Miller with Lifetime, which is a subsidiary of Disney, is why on earth were they okay with this? Were the producers okay with this?
And why wouldn't they do this? Thanks to Schneider, they were making millions off of several iconic franchises, not to mention the international Nickelodeon stars that were created because of his work.
Because we can blame it on Abby, a lot of behaviors and a lot of other stuff gets shifted onto the producers or the moms for having their kids there, but why on earth was Disney and Lifetime okay with this behavior? More specifically, why did they encourage it?
It's important that we talk about the actual specifics of what has been said and piece by piece. So first of all, we need to discuss the disastrous work culture on these shows. When you were hired on a Dan Schneider production, there was an expectation that you work long hours and you be available 24/7 if anything were to come up.
Does it sound similar to how they made the ALDC girls exploitative cash cows for Lifetime? Sound similar? Or how they made Maddie Ziegler the front runner of the show and made millions off of them while they made literally pennies to actually be on the show?
Kendall claims they were working 60 hours a week and yet only paid $250 for the week.
And my mom and I split a contract of $500 a week.
But let's get back to the real topic of this video, which was the similarities between Abby Lee Miller and Dan Schneider, and why I feel like she literally is following this man, or intentionally trying to follow this man's career footsteps, one by one. One step at a time. Jordan Sparks reference.
The average weekday work session could go from 13 to 20 hours, and most weekends were spent at Dan's house trying to workshop ideas.
Now, does that sound exactly like Abby Lee Miller? You dance every single day of the week, you go to school, you come to the dance studio, you stay there, you sometimes as a small child don't get home until past midnight, you wake up, you repeat it again, on weekends you're going to competitions. Any kind of holidays or any breaks from school, you're expected to be taking booty camps at the studio.
If there was a class, Nia was there. If there was booty camp, Nia was there. If there was a private to be had, Nia wanted it.
You are penalized and punished if you don't.
Nia.
Seeing Nia's face on the bottom row, and I'm thinking, that has to be a mistake.
If you ever take a break off, you are the problem.
Can't get a ride? Come to dance class?
We missed one day because we were in New York for Fashion Week. She has been here every single day that we've had class.
Now this part is exactly textbook Abby Lee Miller. It is textbook narcissist behavior.
As documented by several people, Dan certainly had a trend with the kids he would work with. He'd pick one person out, he'd tell them they were going to be a star with his help, and then he'd love bomb them with praise. Until time passed, he would become more passive about his investment in them, and then he would inevitably pick out a new kid to be his next starlet.
Love bombing and picking out a new narcissistic supply, picking out their new golden child. However you may want to put it, it's all the same behavior. And we saw this time and time and time again with Abby Lee Miller. She started out with Brooke Highland before we even saw the show. I'm sure that she did this to numerous other students before she ever had a television show. Then she did this with Maddie Ziegler. She pitted all of the kids on the show against Maddie Ziegler, always comparing them, mentally torturing them, emotionally abusing them. She did it specifically to Maddie's sister, Mackenzie.
Solos. Maddie and Mackenzie will be competing against each other. Mackenzie, you are doing one of Maddie's old solos. When Maddie dances, she's a breath of fresh air. You're like the stuff we spray in the bathroom.
Then she discards Maddie Ziegler, the narcissistic discard. This is also a classic narcissistic move, as documented by psychiatrists and psychologists studying narcissism. And she discards Maddie Ziegler. She replaces her with Sophia Lucia.
First it was Maddie, now it's Sophia.
She treats Maddie the same way that she treated all of the other kids, comparing everybody to Sophia Lucia, putting Sophia on a pedestal and love bombing her and making all of the other kids lament and wish that they could be Sophia.
Chloe's worked her butt off for Abby, and she won a national title. And now Abby's gonna replace her with some girl off the street.
Miss Abby kept saying how much better Sophia was than all of us.
Sophia, outstanding. Chloe, hot mess.
What are we doing to our kids?
Then she replaced her with Kalani. Then she replaced her with Bryn. She did this over and over and over and over. Are we seeing a pattern?
Arthur Granstein, a writer on Drake and Josh, iCarly, and Victorious, made this claim to the New York Times in 2021. I will always be grateful to Dan for taking a chance on me as a rash young writer fresh out of college, and for all I learned over the next 6 years. Much of my experience with him was a blast. He could be generous and validating, and it was exciting to be around his talent and passion for creating entertainment. But he was also unreasonably demanding, controlling, belittling, and vindictive, with a willful disregard for boundaries or workplace appropriateness.
This sounds very, very similar to remarks that have been made by Kalani Hilliker, who was on Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition and then later seen on Dance Moms and currently working with Abby Lee Miller on a dance workshop. She has said very similar things where she experienced all of this trauma and abuse on set, but she also credits and thanks Abby for giving her a career that she would have never had otherwise. So she feels an innate sense of guilt to repay her.
Power balance between a child and an adult is so striking already.
Our kids are lazy fucks.
Say that he was trying to push them towards greatness, but there's also another side.
Yeah.
She's been getting growth hormone shots every day.
You couldn't gain or lose 5 to 10 pounds.
That you add that it's an employment situation. These are 8 to 15-year-olds, and they are often responsible for the entire economic success of their families. What are they going to do if they get in trouble? What if all of this goes away because they complain?
Does that make sense now? Is it better?
And now you should be worried if saying something offended us.
Let's go.
Now let's just see if she can keep that mouth shut.
And even the parents who saw what Dan was doing and didn't like it, they were scared to go up against him because they knew that would have an effect on their children's lives.
I'm gonna go in there and I am gonna get my kids back on that team.
Not to mention the fact that these kids were performing grueling hours to the point that pretty much every week they were breaking child labor laws just to get that shoot in the can.
From the cutthroat world of competitive dance and reality television to the bright lights of scripted Nickelodeon studios, the price of fame weighed heavily on the shoulders of young talents. But now, the spotlight shifts to a darker corner of the industry, where whispers of abuse and exploitation echo through the halls. Join us as we navigate the treacherous waters of power and privilege, shining a light on the shadows that lurk beneath the surface of fame.
In just under 25 years at the network, Dan Schneider became arguably one of the most influential voices in children's entertainment. When it comes to shows where Dan Schneider acted as a proper showrunner, he is most associated with 9 programs. All That, The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, iCarly, Victorious, Sam and Cat, Henry Danger, and Game Shakers. This represents well over 2 decades of children's content.
Similar to how Abby Lee Miller was trying to create an empire with Abby Lee Studio Rescue, Abby's Ultimate Dance Competition, Dance Moms, Abby Lee Dance With Me, Madhouse. In today's video, I'm going to be referencing a video called We Don't Talk About Dan Schneider that was created by the YouTube creator Quentin Review. Now, I would like to make it abundantly clear as we get into this video that I am not saying that Abby Lee Miller is a sex offender, nor am I saying that that is true of Dan Schneider. But I think that this is best said by this gentleman.
Now, something I've seen a lot of people say is that because such poor boundaries were in place, something must have happened. But this is the wrong way to look at this. The correct logic is this: something could have happened, thus there should have been better boundaries. Overwhelmingly, the hardest part about hosting a discussion about this is that so many people believe that Dan Schneider is automatically guilty of child sex abuse. And it's not just that they believe it, it's that they need it to be true. And I don't know why, for the life of me. So when we talk about Dan Schneider and child abuse, please keep in mind that for the most part, we are talking about inappropriate boundaries and severe, intense, emotional abuse. Schneider was so successful and so massive at the network that many felt pleasing him was the only opportunity they had at continuing their careers. And one can only imagine that if the adults were walking on eggshells around him, the kids must have been feeling about the same.
Now, I feel like it's super important to discuss this particular dynamic because whenever we talk about the moms on Dance Moms, people give them so much flack for putting their kids in that situation. And I think it's important to discuss how this dynamic affects people because these moms were all just trying to do right by their children and get them a career started.
Some of us, this was our first job. In the moments to myself, you would just be thinking like, hey, this is what we got to do to be on the show, to stay in the cast and stay in the good graces of the people that were higher up.
This is the hardest thing for me because my kids want to dance and I don't know how long I can hold off.
Because of Abby Lee Miller's personality, all of the moms are tiptoeing around on eggshells. Then all of the children do the same thing. They're all being taught that everybody just needs to be quiet and obey the queen in the room and everything will be great and everybody will be promised fame and success.
Part of that was his relationship with Dan Schneider. They carefully crafted Amanda's career. It was enviable for a lot of the cast members.
I thought we would go to lunch together and talk about her career. What else do you want to do? You just keep winning everything.
I want to be on Broadway.
She has it all. She has what it takes. What about like here? We're in LA. Like, you don't think you could be in a movie?
And I'm not trying to excuse the mom's behavior because as many of us have seen, the moms did bring their kids to this studio in the first place. They did bring them to this situation in the first place, so they have to be taking some accountability.
Oh, showing off your sexy little bod.
Maddie's shy around boys, and now she has to kiss Gino. I know she can do it. Oh, Kendall will kiss him. Just saying.
But I don't think that that means that we should overlook the power dynamic that is at play when somebody can grant you an entirely brand new future.
And even the parents who saw what Dan was doing and didn't like it, they were scared to go up against him because they knew that would have an effect on their children's lives.
You took Maddie and put her on the same level as the rest of those kids. We didn't. We worked our butts off with your kids. So why do you want to come back? You hate it
I
here.
don't want to come back. My kids want to come back. You called my kids stupid.
They are. They make dumb choices. I want them to be amazing. And if they're not willing to be amazing, then hit the door.
You know, I've just come to the decision, as hard as it's going to be for me to go in there and kiss up to that woman, I'm going to do it.
There it is. Signed. Her signature. Now let's just see if she can keep that mouth shut.
The cast members on All That and The Amanda Show were little kids, 12 to 14 years old for the most part. And they were spending those important developmental years worrying about financially supporting their families and continuing their careers after they stopped being cute little angels.
Sound familiar? Sounds similar to Abby Lee Miller trying to make the girls in her group look tiny and young as long as possible. Always dressing up the girls in pigtails to make them look several years younger, talking about how people that look younger are going to be more appealing to Hollywood executives and producers.
The idea of trying to overload yourself with work to maximize the profit you can make off of your own youthfulness, it is a very unhealthy idea for a little kid trying to figure things out.
Lily's really the only person that is tiny enough to fit inside a hanger.
Being little's cute, but for us, it's more of like a serious thing. She was premature. She's been getting growth hormone shots every day since she was like 2.
Being little is good in this industry. Like, is this where you want to be?
And having rules, having a law-abiding contract at your studio that people need to sign saying that they're not going to gain or lose 5 pounds during a competition season.
She made us sign the contract.
Each year, Abby has to sign this stupid contract that locks us in for a year. And in that year, you can't leave her studio, short of death.
You will not get past this front desk without these being signed.
Where's your contract?
Cast members revealing that the ALDC studio contracts were extremely controlling.
If you guys had seen the contract, you'd die.
During season 3, episode 3 of Dance Moms, we see Kelly holding an ALDC contract. By flipping the image and increasing the contrast, we can see that dancers had to agree to the following rules. There was even a clause saying that the girls weren't allowed to gain or lose 10 pounds during a competition season.
To be a part of her studio, you had to sign a contract. A few of the main reasons my mom wouldn't sign was because it said stuff like you couldn't gain or lose 5 to 10 pounds.
And if there was something in the material that these kids didn't like that made them uncomfortable, they weren't gonna go up against Schneider. Because this was the guy who decided if they got a big line, if they got a special skit, and even if they got their own spin-off.
I remember Maddie Ziegler being incredibly sick to her stomach and continuing to dance on one of the very first episodes of Dance Moms.
What's up with Maddie?
She doesn't feel well. She went like this.
Maddie, I know you're not feeling well, but suck it up. We gotta get through this, okay?
She looks green practically and pale. She looks horrible.
She's crying.
Why the tears?
Because my stomach started to hurt.
See that picture? That's the position you need to be in. Get too emotional. You have to worry about the win. Got it? No mishaps.
It's like she's gonna throw up. What do you mean? You never leave dance class.
No, my stomach just started to hurt.
Macy Kay's throwing up in a bucket and having to perform with the flu on her birthday?
I'm sick and I couldn't focus. And I didn't know what to do. It's okay. I just want my mom. It's just the worst birthday ever and I can't do anything.
To me, this seems so similar to Maddie Ziegler having to have her first kiss on television with somebody that she didn't want to because she's being forced to by the headrunner of the show.
We also have a duet. That girl has got to be kissed. Maddie will be doing a musical theater routine with Gino. Right there. You gotta kiss him.
I shouldn't have my first kiss like this, and especially in a dance.
And if Maddie wants to be a star, she has to own this role. Come on, this is it. We gotta get out of this room.
It's just horrible.
Maddie, just kiss him.
And she just has to get it out of her mind.
All right, we only have a few minutes. There you go.
She just wiped her lips off.
That chick sure getting kissed.
Kiss on the lips? No, I had to. It's in the dance.
Kissing Gino in the studio is not what I envisioned for my first kiss. If it was Zac Efron, I would kiss him, but not Gino.
That chick sure getting kissed.
Ew, I don't like him that way.
Maddie was a pro.
And, this happened on Nickelodeon too. Under the production of Dan Schneider. Ali D'Amico says Nickelodeon made her kiss a 30-year-old man at 14 years old. And for those who are unaware, Ali D'Amico starred in the Naked Brothers Band, which aired on Nickelodeon from 2007 to 2009. During the third season, D'Amico's character, who is a teenager in the show, has a romance with Michelle, played by Jake Herzog. In the episode Naked Idol, Herzog kisses D'Amico in front of the main character, which stirs up some drama. After seeing the newly released docuseries, D'Amico took to TikTok as she recalled this scene.
Oh my god, my hair. Do you see? I'm stressed. Why? Because I'm watching I don't know who that is, but it's the Quiet on Set documentary. I had to. We weren't a Dan Schneider pedophile show, but we went through trauma. I went through trauma. Particularly, I had to stop. I don't know who that is. I have to rewind and see because my mind's been wandering to this one multiple times, but and actually multiple episodes, but there was an episode where Rosalina cheated on Nat and kind of kissed a French guy, or she didn't cheat, but it was a scripted show, and a lot of kids thought that it was a documentary in real life, and people, particularly girls, wanted to fight me in real life. I didn't have fans because they thought it was real life, and that I kissed this greasy ass, dusty ass dwarf. I'm sorry to this man, but I did not want to kiss him. Also, guys, I'm 4'11", He's a 30-year-old man. I'm sorry, I couldn't even watch it. It gave me fucking the ick. I couldn't. And it honestly gives me PTSD. I'm watching this Quiet on Set documentary, and it's talking about how integral and vital it is to create, especially when it's like a kid's cast, to create an environment where kids feel comfortable to say no, or I don't feel comfortable with this. And then I'm like, yeah, maybe they do express that, though. It's also more important to create an environment that listens to the kids and actually does not make them do things when they don't want to do them, because they made me kiss this 30-plus-year-old man when I was like, 14, 15. I told them many times I didn't want to do it. My mom was very against it, and they just pretty much made me feel like I was going to lose my job and like be fired if I didn't do it. And it was weird. Think about Naked Brothers, man, and like it was great, but also there was aspects that it wasn't, and it was a highly nepo kids. Everybody knew each other cast, more or less, except for me. So I always felt like I was on the outs. Like Nat and Alex were brothers, and then Thomas, David, everybody, they were all friends. Kasim and I were externally hired. Jesse was their cousin. Polly was the director, producer, writer. Michael was the dad in the show, dad in real life. Like, it was a, from what I'm understanding, probably the most healthiest set out of all the Nickelodeon shows. However, it did have a lot of toxic and not so healthy aspects. And yeah, they made me kiss this guy multiple times, and then I always got hate for it, and it was like PTSD and trauma. But that's my Quiet on Set story, apart from the taking my first kiss away from me. Okay, bye.
Not to mention the fact that these kids were performing grueling hours, to the point that pretty much every week they were breaking child labor laws just to get that shoot in the can.
Now, this one can't come down particularly just on Abby. This is also production, but how many times did we hear them saying the same things about the kids that were working on Dance Moms? And the only reason that they got away with it is because it was a reality television show, so they didn't have the same kind of rules that were actually governing them, same way that you would on a network television show that was scripted. At this point in the video, I wanted to reference Mac Z Boss.
Some very questionable working conditions on set that the cast should have never been subjected to. Let's look at labour laws. Several cast members have accused the producers of breaking child labour laws. When Kelly filed a lawsuit against Collins Avenue in 2014, she claimed that they would constantly break these child labour laws. She says that she began to complain about the girls' insane working schedules back in season 2. They filmed 60 hours a week, and during competitions on Saturdays, they would often end up filming for 12 hours. It is completely illegal. Kids from the ages of 6 to 8 can only film for 8 hours. Kids aged from 9 to 15 can only film for 9 hours. Cast was even filmed while they ate lunch. So even if they technically had a break from dancing, they still had to be switched on for the cameras. Lani claimed that the producers used to break child labour laws.
Whenever we go to dance competitions with child labour laws, we can't work more than 10 hours. So if we were at a real dance competition, there's times where you perform at 8 in the morning and then you don't perform until 11:30 at night. And that would not be good. It would be breaking the law, which they did before, but we don't do it anymore.
The only time there weren't cameras on, either in the different room where they could still hear you, was when you went home. They were always on, even at lunch.
So as we can see, there was definite parallels between working at Nickelodeon and working at Dance Moms in terms of breaking child labor laws. I feel like there is a lot more jurisdiction when it comes to sets that are actually scripted, that are in the union, whereas nobody was really watching carefully over the Dance Moms set, so they got away with this a lot. And I know that this is not directly Abby's fault, nor is it Dan Schneider's, but we'll get to that later in the video.
When I worked with Dan, I felt like the bar was always being risen, and I had to reach that bar. You had to be as good or better, or put more hours in, or do longer things than Dan did. And we all did it, or you got fired.
Abby Lee Miller threatening to replace you.
This is your job. I have 4 kids standing in the hall right now that I looked at on stage that could take any one of your places.
Telling you that it's hard to get to the top of the pyramid, it's even harder to stay there. Telling you that you need to put in more hours, guilt tripping and manipulating and gaslighting you if you don't get first place.
You were second. And what is second?
First to lose.
Second? Are you serious? You were this close, and you blew it.
Someone special, Maddie.
She's second. How is she second?
I look up and the spacing is off. I'm like, oh, geez, Abby's gonna freak out on the girls.
Second place. Trio coming in second place means they lost. Remember, second place is the first loser on stage. I wasn't happy with how you did.
You at least gotta give some positive to those kids. You made my daughter cry. And
She didn't remember the number!
So do you enjoy, like, clapping really loud when somebody beats Kalani?
Abby said, may the best team win, and obviously we didn't win.
These kids deserve better. You're wasting my time and I'm not getting paid to stand down here and argue with you.
I would be editing from 8 a.m. to midnight. You didn't eat, you didn't go to the bathroom. One day, I keeled over, and I ended up having to go to the hospital. And as I'm leaving and curled over, I could hear someone say, "How is the show going to get finished?"
Literally me creating this video all week.
The third element we need to talk about is the proximity that Schneider had to many of his child stars. In the documentary Quiet on Set, various people from The Amanda Show recall how extremely close Schneider and Amanda were. She'd often be so close to him that they'd be borderline cuddling, and it wasn't uncommon for Schneider to receive back rubs from Amanda Bynes.
Now, I think that you could say that this is arguably the most important part of the video and why I made this video, because the list of inappropriate behaviors from Abby Lee Miller that are so mirroring to this behavior by Dan Schneider is way too long to ignore. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on this segment of the video. From Abby Lee Miller giving highly inappropriate sexual gifts to small children, to Abby Lee Miller kissing her students, cuddling her students, making them give her foot rubs. It was all incredibly inappropriate, and we watched this happen on our own televisions, and we were all cringing and uncomfortable just watching it.
This tendency for him to physically touch his child stars is present in several very infamous photos.
Now, I get a lot of people that are highly critical of me criticizing Abby Lee Miller, saying that, yes, although she was awful to those kids sometimes, that to draw a comparison between her and Dan Schneider's behavior is just absolutely crossing a line, and that is quite literally why I made this video, because it's not crossing a line. Why is there a double standard for Abby Lee Miller doing all of the exact same behaviors and sometimes worse to children?
On top of this, his reputation for asking women on set for massages, be they adults or children, is well documented by many, many sources and is one of the most clear examples of sexual harassment from Schneider going across 2.5 decades, if not more.
So if that is what Dan Schneider is being accused of, let us make the same direct comparison to Abby Lee Miller, who has also been seen here groping Christy Lucasiak's butt, as well as kissing Maddie Ziegler on the lips.
Mackenzie and I spent a lot of time together. We're buddies, right, babe?
You made her massage.
Yeah, she used to walk on my back, and then she'd have to rub my feet. And I need you to rub this foot right here, please. Woo, doggy. And what's underneath? The ball? Then that's what needs rubbing. Come on, harder, harder, harder.
So if it's a creepy sexual allegation towards Dan Schneider, what does that make this? Is this friendly fun times? Does this seem like a joyful occasion for Mackenzie?
Yeah, can you squeeze it?
Now, I heard of Dan Schneider making people give him massages. Same with Abby Lee Miller. I never heard of Dan Schneider ever making somebody give him a foot massage. Like, that's way worse. And he's the one with the foot fetish and the foot creeper from every single frickin' Nickelodeon series that he worked on. And here's Abby Lee Miller making the youngest member of her cast give her a foot massage. You fill in the blanks.
If Abby had done any of these things on its own, I would perhaps see it as her misjudging what's appropriate to do. But when you combine them all together, it really makes me think that it's something we need to keep an eye on. One of the oldest men with which she seemed to have a questionable relationship was John Corella.
That's right, folks. As much as some of you love to be Abby apologists and love to believe that Abby is completely innocent, she has been a perpetrator of definite inappropriate behavior over the years with people of all ages and all genders. Let's take another peek at a Mac Z Boss video that documented all of this so well. Here's some important bits from that video.
John is around 11 years younger than Abby and is credited with creating the concept for Dance Moms. However, the age gap is not the issue in this situation. Abby says that she has known John since he was about 13 or 14, when she would see him every year at Dance Masters of America. In fact, Abby was at one point in time the president of the Pennsylvania Dance Masters of America. Well, she has mentioned several times that she thinks John is a hot guy, but much worse is this image that was leaked of Abby grabbing him very inappropriately. Considering she watched him grow up and would have been 24 or 25 when they first met, I really don't want to think about how their relationship got to this point.
Dance Moms started with a hot guy. So dads, you might want to cover your ears. Most of my stories start with a hot guy. I had known him since he was 13 years old, 14 maybe. He competed at a big national competition that I attended every year.
If you're not seeing all of these red flags already, let me break it down for you. Abby has known this John Corella since he was 13 or 14. She has been calling him a hot guy for years.
I teach children from 3 years old to 18. I practically raised these kids. So I saw this guy grow up, and he was masculine, good looking.
She has grabbed his butt. She's now working with him and has considered segueing past any form of physical and social boundaries. This is called grooming.
No, we're not a good match.
No, then why are you dating him?
Because he's really young and hot.
Oh, well.
On top of this, Dan tended to keep the personal phone numbers of his cast members. He would often text them during off hours, as well as have dinner with them. He would even invite them all to his house for various holiday parties.
We had Abby Lee Miller taking kids all the way to New York. We had Abby Lee Miller calling Maddie on set and having Maddie call her several times throughout the day while she is working on other projects.
I have been rehearsing. You're opening doors for me, and you're opening doors for the rest of these kids.
We had Abby inviting everybody over to her house.
I had the kids and the moms come on out to my house.
Crossing all those good old-fashioned boundaries. As far as I can tell, considering Dan Schneider is a married man, I'm not sure that he was ever in any official relationships with any younger starlets, but this does have a similarity to the other casts from Schneider's Bakery, which was Dan's subsidiary company within Nickelodeon, and such people such as Liz Gillies, who ended up dating somebody nearly twice her age, Jeanette McCurdy dating somebody 30 years old from the cast the second that she turned 18, to the weirdly close relationship that Dan had with Amanda and urging her to be emancipated. There's just so much that's very similar to people that surrounded Dan's inner circle. So even though there are tons of documented cases of Abby Lee Miller dating younger men, like way younger than her, I'm not going to cover them in this video just because, for one, it's not illegal, and for two, it's not really similar to Dan Schneider, so just not something we're going to cover in this video.
Teenage children.
So this is where we come up on the meat and potatoes of this video, because this is why I made this video, and more importantly, these are the disgraceful actions that I feel like Abby Lee Miller should rightfully be critiqued for and criticized for.
If you thought what we've covered so far was disturbing, just you wait. Things are going to get more ethically questionable from here on out.
The way that she would sexualize Kalani as a teenage child, and the way that she sent out underwear and lingerie to literal, first graders, that is so wrong. Let's get into that.
Abby made an incredibly inappropriate joke about a competitor who was only 14 years old. Why anyone would ever think this sort of thing, I don't know. In one of Eliana's YouTube videos, she claims that Abby is obsessed with her 14-year-old boyfriend Jensen. Abby DMs her, basically saying that she has a crush on him. She then went on to say that Jensen liked her and was in complete awe of her when they met.
She loves me. She put me at the top of the pyramid, and then she
DMs me so much, basically telling me that she has a crush on Jensen.
Pretty much.
I mean, come on, that kid that you're with, he liked me a couple weeks ago. He was in awe of me.
Brady revealed that Abby would take him to the mall, hand him clothes, and call him Geordie.
Geordie was, I don't know if like her boyfriend or I'm not your boyfriend.
When JoJo first came out earlier this year,
Good for her. And that's what I said. I said, you know what, JoJo? That's more hot young guys out there for me.
I don't know if the new moms understand like the level of how much Abby loves Kalani.
Her legs look good, her feet look good.
Like I sat next to her one day and she was watching Kalani solo.
Kalani is great at floor work. She can slither around on the floor looking so feminine.
And she was like, don't you just want to be her?
I was just gonna say, Abby wants to be
She wants to be Kalani.
Kalani's just smooth.
Kalani told me she was trying on costumes for her or something, and she was like, ooh, that with like a pair of boots and like leggings, and yes.
What? Because unless you want to wear those shorts and that bra. Well, no, when you look like Kalani, you can just wear whatever. No one's looking at the leotard.
Kira, it has to bother you a little bit that you are sewing a bra in the dressing room as her costume.
I was 15.
There are quite literally so many more instances of this that I couldn't find clip examples for, but I remember seeing.
Dawn Check was a guest for an episode on Christy's podcast.
Abby would give the kids like a little gift. But the one year, December 2010, she gave the little ones, so like Mackenzie and Maddie, got little bras and panties, but our girls, who were a little bit older, anywhere from 7 up, you got a G-string. And not just any G-string, but holiday G-strings with pom-poms on them, like Christmas holiday G-strings.
Yup. She gave this to us. I was 10. I didn't even know what this was. I had no idea.
Holly gave hers back. She said it was inappropriate. Holly was like so upset.
Look who's here.
Uh-oh, trouble.
McCurdy. Hello.
Hello.
In her book, I'm Glad My Mom Died, Jeanette McCurdy gives extensive descriptions of how the creator was on set.
For this next segment, I feel like I don't even need to say anything. I can just show you the clips, and if you've even watched 5 seconds of Dance Moms, you know.
According to McCurdy, if an actor got a line wrong or messed up a take, it wasn't uncommon for Schneider to go into a fit of rage, screaming in the child's face, even when we're talking about actors as young as 6 years old.
Because I think you're ridiculous! How many people are sitting on a yoga ball every morning? Get off your butt, walk over to Ross, and buy a ball! That's your fault. All of you.
There would be times where Amanda would just be missing. And a lot of times we would just hear that she would be with Dan, pitching ideas and writing. We've seen them grow closer to each other on set.
The incident where Abby kissed a child on television without consent. While both the mums and fans laughed it off as a funny joke at the time, it seems really creepy in retrospect. Abby was a teacher who wielded a lot of power over Maddie's life and career at the time. She knew how quickly Abby's mood could change from pleased to angry, so of course Maddie's response was to laugh along.
All That cast member Angelique Bates recalled to Business Insider a similar story about Schneider yelling at her after she messed up a sketch. This caused her to run off the set crying. Dan was like a tornado. He'd come in and like, whew, and you'd be like, wow, okay, what just happened?
You got picked to do a solo to go up against Maddie.
That's 2 grown-ups against 1 child.
No, you're not gonna run in there and cry boo-hoo-hoo. I've had it.
She's yelling at me. I know, take a deep breath. Honey, we hear her yelling at you.
Oh my God, are you kidding? This is you realizing that your kid is not picking up fast enough.
We see up there is 2 grown-ups screaming at 1 kid.
What goes on in here is 2 grown-ups trying to battle your kid to get her to dance. You're done, go.
Kendall is tired, overworked. She knows nothing she can do is gonna be good enough. You know!
Kendall, you're finished for today. You know what? You're done. The people that were in here dancing are 1,000 times better than you. What's wrong?
He keeps yelling at me.
Done. You're finished. Next. Who's solo?
The set would not feel the same when he would leave because everyone was on their toes, scared. One of the most infamous examples of this was on the set of Zoe 101, as later recalled by Alexa Nicholas. The main star of the show, Jamie Lynn Spears, was a former All That cast member and the sister of pop star Britney Spears. So one day on the Zoe 101 set, Alexa is minding her own business when who appears around a corner out of nowhere but Britney Spears. Britney has been debriefed by Jamie Lynn about all the on-set drama, and she has decided to put up a fight for her sister. And so she goes up to Alexa and she starts screaming in her face until Alexa is sobbing and crying, curled up in a fetal position on the ground. So sometime later, Alexa is summoned to a chamber of executives. Her mother isn't there, but who is there is Dan Schneider. And Dan allegedly begins screaming in her face about what happened. And he yells specifically, the show's called Zoe 101, not Nicole 101. His stance is that Alexa is disposable, the show doesn't need her, and because of that, she is in the wrong for any incidents that happen on set. After this, she tells her mother she wants to quit, and Nickelodeon lets her out of her contract.
Now, we've seen Abby Lee Miller scream at every single child that's been on this show. We've seen Abby Lee Miller say herself that they would not have any of these opportunities if it wasn't for Maddie. That Maddie is the reason why they get all of these opportunities, and it is the Maddie show. We've seen her hurl countless insults at countless mothers and daughters until they left the show as well.
Here, Schneider might have been a little frustrated about how he was still stuck in the realm of kids' TV when he kind of wanted to make adult shows, and Victorious was kind of a way for him to experiment and push that envelope. And that especially seems true when it came to the way that he sexualized the women on that show. I think one of the most obvious examples of this is the season 1 episode where they get stuck in the RV and they're just locked in this RV during a heat wave and they're just lounging around in, bikinis, getting all sweaty.
Now, the exact same thing could be said about Abby Lee Miller, again, with Dance Moms, and this goes even deeper, but we have the fantastic number where she had the kids wearing nude-colored costumes on stage, emulating naked dancers, like fan dancers from Vegas. We had the electricity number. There was many other inappropriate things that happened on this show regarding the kids. She was always telling them to dance sexy, saying that they looked sexy as a group. Like 9-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. Like, what is going on in your mind? Did you run that thought through your brain before you said it?
You have to be really hot, sexy. Make it like you're 17 years old. Okay, the new number, big hot, it's sassy. Kids are dressed so skimpy and we're so hot and dynamic on stage that I wanted to do something similar.
Now let's keep in mind that the oldest child in the room right there, the oldest kid on that dance cast is 14. The oldest.
I don't care what anybody says. It's my studio, it's my company. More butt, it's all about the butt.
Where's the rest of her costume? I think it's too sexy. I absolutely think it's too sexy.
Can we not use the word sexy? Can we just say skimpy?
It's still too much for their age.
The costume is completely age inappropriate. The gestures and the movement in the dance is unacceptable.
I'm trying to be supportive of my child. I want her to do well. I want her to perform to the best of her ability on stage. I'm conflicted.
I think it's going to be a clean sweep. I think it's fabulous.
She would sell her kid.
She would sell
Tom, Dick, or Harry on the street corner if she thought it would get her face on television.
I've had a lot of people try to pitch to me ways where you could read Dan Schneider's actions in this situation as like secretly malicious, like it was an example of his misogyny or his special treatment of his special stars. But the thing is, I think it's kind of a strange ordeal to want to believe that every single action Dan ever made in his entire life was secretly evil, because I think the narrative you spin when you go down that path is that if Dan Schneider ever did anything good or nice or justifiable, that forgives the other stuff, and it absolutely doesn't. Just because Dan Schneider did the right thing in the Drake Bell case doesn't mean he doesn't deserve any criticism for all the other stuff we've talked about in this video.
And I think the exact same thing could be said for Abby here. I think that a lot of the things that Abby did come from the goodness of her heart, if she has one. But that doesn't take away from everything that we've discussed in this video that she did do.
In 2014, Dan Schneider was allegedly investigated for allegations of the on-set atmosphere on the show Sam and Cat. In 2018, rumors and allegations of Schneider committing sexual misconduct against his stars, alongside complaints of people on set, triggered another investigation. No evidence was found of the alleged sexual misconduct with his stars, but evidence of emotional abuse was found. After this, Schneider and the network went their separate ways, and he has never worked on television since.
Again, I think that this draws comparison between Abby Lee Miller and Dan Schneider is that neither one of them have actually been convicted of any kind of sexual harassment or sexual assault, anything like that on a set. So we're not accusing Abby of that. I'm not accusing Dan of that. However, their actions have both been similar, as we've seen illustrated in this video, and their actions have both been emotionally abusive.
So I feel I have to be absolutely direct and clear about this. I think a lot of videos about Dan Schneider set out with the goal of proving that Schneider did stuff that was bad enough that he should be in prison right now and forever. I've always felt this is kind of a really steep hill to try and climb, which probably affects how a lot of people cover certain bits of information. So for me, my only goal over the last 3 years has been to try and prove that not only was it justified to fire Dan Schneider in 2018, he arguably should have been fired far before then.
Now, this is where Dan Schneider and Abby Lee Miller are same but different. Abby Lee Miller went on, she continued creating Dance Moms season after season after season, and she had another season in the works with them, with Lifetime that is, until rumors came forward from multiple previous cast members from the show about racist remarks from Abby Lee Miller. So it was not sexual misconduct, but Abby Lee Miller was dropped from Lifetime and fired, essentially, from Dance Moms. But it wasn't for sexual misconduct. However, you could definitely say that just like Dan Schneider, she should have probably been fired a long time before that.
And at this point, unless hell freezes over or the Daily Wire has a really stupid idea, Dan Schneider will never work in television again.
As for Abby, no major network television is ever going to pick up this lady ever again. However, Brandon Television has, and she's continuing to self-produce her projects.
Dan Schneider, the fall guy. So this is probably going to be the part of the video that people misconstrue the easiest. So I apologize if I have to kind of over-explain what I'm going for here. When I say the phrase Dan Schneider, the fall guy, a lot of you are probably anticipating that my thesis statement is going to be that when Dan Schneider was fired from Nickelodeon, it meant that other people who were complicit in a lot of these problems got away scot-free.
This brings us to the last segment of the video, and this, I think, is very important to be said.
Is the phenomenon of Dan Schneider as a cultural fall guy. And to explain this, I am now going to repeat a quote that I have seen online verbatim so many times that it's not even funny. And this is the quote. Dan Schneider is single-handedly responsible for everything that went wrong in Amanda Bynes' life. Is he though? Or is it just an easier conversation if we blame one semi-retired guy for everything instead of talking about the cultural system that consistently trades in the mental health of children for millions of dollars?
I don't think that Abby Lee Miller is at fault for everything that I've mentioned in this video. That is why I said in the beginning that the moms do have to take some accountability, and not just the moms. We always forget that, yes, the moms were on television, but there are other parents in this dynamic, and aside from, we obviously saw that Maddie Ziegler's dad clearly did not want her in this show and tried to get his daughters out of this studio and off the show. Round of applause to him. Nobody else wanted that. We didn't see that from any other fathers that I can recall on the show. However, we also talked about the producers briefly, and I think that the producers were one of the major problems, especially because they financially backed Abby and decided that this behavior that they saw from Abby Lee Miller was something that they wanted to pour so much money and an entire production team and a network television series to back it. And on that topic, one of the most haunting similarities that I see between Dan Schneider and the production team of Dance Moms is the two females for one salary, a mom and a kid, or in Nickelodeon's case, two writers. It's so sick.
They were getting two for the price of one. They were going to hire two women and have them share a salary.
So we signed a 7-year contract with Lifetime Television, and my mom and I split a contract of $500 a week.
And the kids didn't get a paycheck. We got one paycheck and had to split.
This number would become $4.17 per hour, which would be below the Pennsylvania minimum wage.
As the final curtain falls, we've journeyed through the murky depths of power and privilege in the entertainment industry. From the ruthless world of competitive dance to the glitzy stages of Nickelodeon, we've confronted uncomfortable truths and unsettling parallels between both Abby Lee Miller and Jill. No, I'm totally kidding. Dan Schneider. But our journey doesn't end here. It's a reminder that behind every glittering facade lies a darker reality, one that demands our attention and scrutiny. As we bid farewell, let us carry forward the lessons learned, standing vigilant against the abuse of power and championing the voices of those who have been silenced. Thank you for joining us on this illuminating exploration. Remember, the truth may be masked, but it's never hiding for long. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and continue to question the narratives that shape our world. Now, I know today's video was a lot more of a serious topic than we typically cover here on my YouTube channel, but please let me know what you guys thought of everything that we discussed in the video and what you felt about the creepy, to say the least, parallels between Dan Schneider and Abby Lee Miller's actions. Let me know. A match made in hell. Now, quickly before we go, if you enjoy this longer format, documentary style, video essay style content, I would love your support in creating more videos like this. I do have a Patreon. I only have 3 patrons, but thank you to my patrons who I will include on screen right now. But if you would like to support me in creating more of these documentaries, I will leave my Patreon linked. I have been working on this video for probably 50 hours. It took me all week putting it together. So these longer videos, they will take me a lot longer to do. But if there are people that do want to support these videos, I would love to create more of them. And potentially a new one coming soon on Amanda Bynes. So stay tuned for that. Also, thank you to you guys for supporting my channel. We have hit 70,000 subscribers here on my channel, which is absolutely wild. So thank you to every single one of you guys that views the videos on my channel. You guys mean the absolute most to me, and you are the reason that makes making these videos possible.